Every crime hides a story. Every story hides a truth. Welcome to The Watcher, where we uncover the mysteries others look away from. There are places where life feels as though it has frozen in time. Cedar Hollow was one of those places, a quiet town nestled in the woods where the air always smelled faintly of pine, and the sound of cicadas was as constant as the steady tick of the clock. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest events usually involved a church social or a high school football game. The Miller family had always been a part of that fabric. George, the high school history teacher, had a smile that could light up a room. Rebecca, his wife, was known for her homemade pies and her gentle way of settling any dispute in the neighborhood. Their children, Mia and Lucas, were just like the other kids in Cedar Hollow. Mia, at 14, was smart and artistic, with dreams of leaving town for bigger adventures. Lucas, only 9, was quieter, his love for books and puzzles evident in the way he spent hours in the backyard, his eyes always scanning the world around him. On the evening of July 18, 2003, everything changed. It was a warm summer evening, the kind that promised the slow, peaceful end of a perfect day. George had been in the local diner, sipping his usual cup of coffee and reading the paper. Rebecca, who had spent the afternoon running errands, had just returned home. Their house was quiet. Too quiet. Rebecca called out to her children as she entered the house, expecting to hear their voices in the background. But there was nothing. A sinking feeling settled in her stomach as she moved through the house, her eyes scanning every corner. There was no sign of the kids. The house was locked from the inside, and the dinner she had left on the table was still warm, untouched. The family's car was still parked in the driveway. The only thing out of place was a glass of water sitting on the kitchen counter, slightly askew, as though someone had put it down in a hurry. Panic gripped her as she ran through the house again, calling their names, her voice trembling. But no one answered. It didn't make sense. Rebecca dialed 911, her voice barely a whisper as she told the operator, "I think my family is gone. I can't find them anywhere. They're just gone." Within minutes, the police were at the scene. But despite the initial search of the house, there was no sign of a struggle. No forced entry. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except for the fact that the Miller family had simply vanished. Detective Rachel Green was just a young officer at the time of the disappearance. Cedar Hollow was the kind of town where things like this just didn't happen. The idea that an entire family could disappear in the middle of the night seemed impossible, but Rachel was tasked with the investigation. At first, the case seemed like a straightforward missing persons case. The family had no known enemies and there was no obvious motive. Friends and neighbors were questioned, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The Millers had been the picture of suburban bliss. So what happened? Rachel worked tirelessly, tracking down leads and searching for any clues, but as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that no one knew anything. The case went cold. As the years passed, the investigation stalled. Cedar Hollow moved on. The Miller family's disappearance became a ghost story whispered behind closed doors. The town's residents tried to forget, but the tragedy was never fully erased. For Rachel, it became a weight she couldn't shake off. Even as new cases came and went, she kept thinking about the Millers, about the lives that had been lost in a way no one could explain. Rachel had been on the force for nearly 5 years now, and her role in Cedar Hollow had shifted. She was no longer a rookie, she was seasoned, experienced. But every time she passed Oak Street, where the Miller house still stood empty, she felt a tug at her heart. In 2008, Rachel was reassigned, and the Miller case was filed away, marked as unsolved. By 2012, Cedar Hollow had almost forgotten the Millers. But Rachel never did. It wasn't until 2021 that the case took an unexpected turn. Rachel, now working a desk job after years of field work, was looking through old cold cases when she found herself revisiting the Miller file. She ran her fingers over the familiar photographs of the family, the notes and timelines of that fateful evening. It was like she was reliving it all over again. The familiar sting of regret washed over her. She had never been able to solve this case, and now, more than ever, she felt the weight of it. But then something caught her eye, a report about an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. A construction worker had stumbled upon a soda can hidden beneath the floorboards during some renovation work. The can had been left undisturbed for nearly 2 decades. It was something Rachel had missed in her original investigation, a lead that no one had followed up on. At first, it seemed insignificant. But when the soda can was tested for DNA, everything changed. The results came back within a week, and Rachel was floored by what she learned. The DNA didn't match any of the Miller family members, but it did match someone else, someone she hadn't expected to be involved at all. The DNA pointed to Alice Peterson. Alice Peterson had been a well-known figure in Cedar Hollow. She had been involved with George Miller for a time, and though their relationship had ended years ago, Alice's name had always lingered in the background. She had disappeared shortly after the Miller family vanished, and most people assumed she had left town to escape the drama of her affair with George. But now, Rachel realized that Alice's departure wasn't about escaping an affair. It was about escaping the consequences of a crime she had committed. Rachel's investigation into Alice Peterson began with a sense of urgency. She re-interviewed people who had known Alice, digging deeper into her life. As Rachel spoke with Alice's old friends and acquaintances, she uncovered a troubling pattern. Alice had always been obsessed with George Miller. When he ended their affair to return to his family, Alice had become bitter and vengeful. But was that enough to drive her to murder? Rachel began to piece together a timeline of events. Alice had likely been following George and his family, watching them from the shadows. She had never truly let go of her feelings for him. And when the Miller family disappeared, Alice had vanished without a trace. But why? Rachel's breaking point came when she discovered a key piece of evidence, a set of photographs that Alice had kept. These photos weren't just of George. Some were of Rebecca, Mia, and Lucas. Alice had been watching them all along. The truth came to light slowly, but it was devastating. Alice hadn't acted alone. She had been helped by someone close to the Miller family, a trusted friend, a neighbor, someone who had known them intimately. This betrayal, this crushing blow to everything Rachel had believed about the town, shook her to her core. The truth was unbearable. Alice Peterson had murdered the Miller family, not because of a broken affair, but because of jealousy, obsession, and a need for control. She had taken the lives of 4 innocent people, and the town had never known. Rachel, devastated by the revelation, stood in the empty Miller house for the first time in years. She had solved the case, but the closure didn't bring peace. The Millers were gone, their lives erased by a senseless act. And in the end, all Rachel could do was stand in the silence, the weight of the loss heavy in her chest. As Rachel left the Miller house one final time, she found herself whispering an apology into the wind. The town of Cedar Hollow had learned the truth, but it could never undo the pain. The Miller family was gone, but the scars of their disappearance would remain forever. What do you think could have happened to the Miller family on that fateful night? Could someone they trusted be involved, or is there something even more sinister at play? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more chilling and true crime story to The Watcher.